Science fiction can be fun. Science fiction can be exciting. You can learn a lot about humanity. You can learn a lot about the world and the universe and science. You can learn about strange new worlds, seek out new life and new civilizations, go boldly where no one has gone before. And then there's also the darker side of science fiction. The side of science fiction that is existential and terrifying and ominous. I've explored countless works of science fiction on this channel since I started making YouTube videos. Many of them have centered around some of the darker themes in science fiction. This video will consist of a compilation of some of the darkest stories in science fiction. If you've been watching this channel for a while, some of them you may have seen, but some of them you may have not. From Jill Tarter, NASA, SETI, to James Powell and Richard Tuna, care of Brookhaven National Laboratory, June 5th, 1986. Our last Hilton meeting on interstellar travel and communication was a real eye-opener for me, until finally having the chance to sit down and talk with you face to face. I never really believed that the galaxy might be a chessboard with an unseen player at the other end, and that whether or not we choose to play, we may face judgment on our mastery of the game, in which case we may be eliminated at any moment.
So I think I've uncovered a bit of a treasure. The Killing Star by Charles Pellegrino and George Zebrowski was originally published in 1995, and it paints a very dark but seemingly plausible picture of humanity's potential future.
The book is about several things: genetic engineering and cloning. It's about the destructive power of fanaticism. It's about the overconfidence and the hubris of humanity. And that theme really gets hammered home in this book with all its references to the Titanic, which for a very long time has been thought of as one of the greatest symbols of human hubris. It's about AI, and when it goes too far, it's about our overdependence on technology. It's about humanity's indefinite survival outside of Earth, and most importantly, it's about the devastating and swift annihilation of the vast majority of the human race. For those who lived to look back, the most fearsome deaths were the quickest. Those who did not survive the first human contact with the intruders were alive in one moment, the billions of them happy or unhappy, seeking new loves, leaving old loves behind, or choosing to be alone, building towards small dreams, large dreams, or having no dreams at all. And then, over an entire hemisphere of Earth, their consciousness dissolved, as if they had been the dream of something alien, suddenly waking. This book depicts the very fast and sudden, meticulous obliteration of the human race by an outside invading alien force. The attack happens sometime during the late 21st century. During this time, humankind had made significant technological and social advancements. The population had balanced out to about 2 billion, so overpopulation was no longer an issue. And much of their labor is done by self-replicating robots who were themselves built by smaller robots. Humans at this point lived in various communities in space, as well as on Earth. Earth itself was a thriving paradise. This book also mentions genetic engineering and cloning a lot, and it's all pretty interesting. Humankind's mastery of genetic engineering had allowed them to bring back extinct animals like the dinosaurs. And interestingly enough, I also found a cool fact about one of the authors of this book, Charles Pellegrino. He supposedly wrote an article in Omni magazine about how we could potentially be able to clone dinosaurs from flesh-feeding flies preserved in amber, which apparently actually inspired Michael Crichton to write Jurassic Park. In this book, there's actually even a little dinosaur named Crichton, which I think is a funny reference. Genetic engineering wasn't all good though. Through genetic engineering, radical groups of religious people known as resurrectionists were also able to create exact copies of prophets and wise men throughout history, including Jesus and Buddha. Yeah, it gets pretty wild. Now, the book does mention that there was no way to actually know if the DNA they cloned was actually from these figures, but ultimately it doesn't matter, because that's the way fanaticism works. Well, it doesn't matter until it does matter, but I won't spoil that part of the book for you. But regardless of all this, what is interesting about this book is that for all the progress that humanity has made, basically living in a utopian society at this point. It doesn't matter. They were already doomed. Our location had already been revealed a long time ago. As I said, the book is about the destruction of the human race. It follows the last remnants of humanity as they struggle to survive throughout the solar system, while hiding from aliens who are making a game out of seeking them out. But the question is, why were the aliens attempting to annihilate humanity at all? The book presents 3 laws of alien behavior. 1. Their survival will be more important to them than ours. 2. Wimps don't become top dogs. 3. They will always assume that the first 2 laws apply to us. So basically these mean what they sound like they mean. The first simply means if an alien race has to choose between them and us, they aren't going to choose us. Species just don't survive by being self-sacrificing. The second is also self-explanatory. No species makes it to the top by being passive. A species in charge of any given planet in the universe will undoubtedly be highly intelligent, alert, aggressive, and when necessary, ruthless. And I don't really need to elaborate on the third law. Now, if you've read the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, this might sound familiar to you. It's strikingly similar to the concept of cosmic sociology and the related concept of chain of suspicion, which appear in that series. And that's not the only similarity that this book shares with that series either. This book at its core has the same central theme as that series. Life in the universe is hostile to other life. So the only real safe option for a species is to stay silent or risk annihilation by a technologically superior race. Now, I explained the concept of the Dark Forest in the context of the 3-body problem in this video. The concept is essentially the same in this book. A Valkyrie engine burn could be seen out to a radius of several light years, and may draw us into a game we'd rather not play. A game in which, if we appear to be even the vaguest threat to another civilization, and if the resources are available to eliminate us, then it is logical to do so. The game plan is in its simplest terms, the relativistic inverse to the golden rule. Do unto the other fellow as he would do unto you, and do it first. The destruction of Earth essentially happens in an instant in the beginning of this book. In a single instant, nearly every living thing is wiped off of the face of the planet. The attack had been meticulously planned long in advance. Humanity is only even able to detect their ships when the alien vessels suddenly engage their engines after years of cruising at low speed. "You're kidding me," Peterson said. "You've got to be fucking kidding me." "Multiple deceleration sources," the computer replied. "Distance 5 light months. Velocity 92% light speed. Your opinion?" "They must have been cruising at that speed for decades," he shouted. "And now they're turning on their engines all at once. Correction, they turned them on all at once." He stared at the display. "They're scattered across light months. They can't be communicating with each other. So they must have synchronized years in advance to light up their engines now. But why? And why so many of them?" His throat constricted as he said, "Call Earth." Before anybody could react to what was happening even, one of the objects heading towards the Earth suddenly split into thousands of pieces. The projectiles came rushing for the Earth, and the planet was essentially annihilated. Every nerve in her body began to record a strange prickling sensation. The sheer pressure of the photons trying to push her backward. No shadows were cast anywhere in the tower. So bright was the glare. It pierced walls, ceramic beams, notepads, and people. 400,000 people. The Maglev terminal connecting Sri Lanka Tower to London and Sydney. The waste treatment centers that sustain the lakes and farms. All the shops, theaters, and apartments liquefied instantly. In Kandy and Colombo, where sidewalks steamed, the relativistic onslaught was unfinished. The electromagnetic pulse alone killed every living thing as far away as Bombay and the Maldives. All of India south of the Godavari River became an instant microwave oven. Near the epicenter, Demon Rock glowed with fierce red heat, then fractured down its center, as if to herald the second coming of the tyrant it immortalized.
So now I'm going to get into the really heavy spoilers for this book.
So if you really care about spoilers and you want to read this book, maybe stop watching this because the tail end of this book gets pretty wild. But also, before you go rushing to buy this book, I must warn you, it's not really available in any reasonable, accessible capacity. There's an audiobook made by Audible, but not an ebook, and all of the paperbacks and hardcovers are used and they cost about $40 or more each. It's a shame because I believe that this very well may have been the book that inspired Liu Cixin to write the Three-Body Problem series, because both series share a central idea, but alas, the book is just not very accessible at this point. Now that that's out of the way, on to the spoilers. Most of the book follows the various pockets of humanity throughout the solar system as they attempt to avoid the detection of the aliens. Most of them are slaughtered ruthlessly. At least one group of humans escapes untraceably into deep space. Two of the humans that survive the destruction of the Earth end up being taken captive by the aliens, who are grotesque, blind, octopus-like creatures, a direct reference to H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, actually. Except that these aliens were, of course, much more successful at destroying humanity than the aliens in H.G. Wells' classic book. It is not clear the exact intent that the aliens have for these two humans, but they seem to be viewed as pets or as interesting creatures in a museum. It is not clear whether the aliens will keep these humans alive and breed them to study them, or whether or not they will let them perish eventually. The alien life form who calls himself Tha Tent is able to communicate with them using an artificial voice. The alien ship is maintained entirely by robotic crab-like creatures. Through communicating with the alien on board the ship, the humans realize that the machines were actually not subservient to the aliens, but in fact the opposite was true. The aliens had become slaves to the machines they had once created to serve them. Are you suggesting that your machines guide this ship, decide what secrets must be kept, and dictate your military strategies? You stupid bastards, Jonathan said, turning his back on the alien. You let it all get out of hand. Tha Tent inched forward. What did I tell you? Some of your assumptions are wrong. Now gird yourselves up and know this. It is not the machines who work in our best interests or serve us or belong to us. It is very much the other way around. They keep us here and watch over us, only because they find us interesting. The aliens had somehow allowed their artificial intelligence to get out of hand, until they eventually became subservient to it. It was that AI which had made the decision to destroy Earth. It is mentioned that the aliens would not have thought of humanity as a threat if not for humanity beginning to develop interstellar capabilities. It was simply logical to them to eliminate humanity before it had the chance to become a problem. So this book was really great, and it has so many concepts that I didn't even go into. Maybe I'll go into them in later videos. If I had to guess, I would say that it's pretty likely that Liu Cixin read this book, and if not, then it's pretty interesting that he came up with such a similar concept. But it's not like the idea of the Dark Forest hasn't been thought of before. Legendary physicist Stephen Hawking believed that contacting aliens would be a bad idea for the same reason. An eerie idea that this book also includes is the idea that it's not merely enough to be quiet, but listening could be dangerous as well. Data that is recorded and saved from outer space could potentially contain a virus designed to attack a technologically dependent society. So even listening quietly isn't necessarily safe. So as I said, I really enjoyed this book. I hope it becomes more accessible in the future. Have you read The Killing Star? What do you think of it? Tell me in the comments below, and also make sure you like and subscribe for more Quinn's ideas.
Your brain wasn't built for the conception any more than it was built for the conception of infinity or of eternity. You can only talk about it. A fraction of the reality upsets you, and when the real thing comes, your brain is going to be presented with the phenomenon outside of its limits of comprehension. You will go mad, completely and permanently. There is no question of it.
What if humanity evolved on a world where the sun never set, and as a result, humankind developed a fear of the dark
nyctophobia so severe that even a few minutes of it could lead to severe psychological distress. In such a world, darkness would be more than merely the absence of light. It would be an unthinkable terror, a force that could unravel the mind itself. That is the premise of Asimov's Nightfall, a story that asks the question, what happens when a world bathed in endless sunlight faces its first true night?
Nightfall by Asimov is interesting because you can read two versions of it. Nightfall was originally published as a short story in 1941, and then later adapted into a novel in 1990 with the help of Robert Silverberg. Both versions have the same premise but differ vastly in scope and character depth. The short story is only about 30 pages long, a good length for a short story, but the novel is easily over 300 pages. Now, the 1941 short story is undoubtedly a classic, and the novel is great in its own right, but it was written 50 years later at a completely different stage of Asimov's career. So for the purposes of this video, we'll focus mainly on the short story, which is a lot more concise and focused compared to the novel. 1941 would be the very beginning of the golden age of science fiction. Asimov's fledgling days, really. When I finally get around to my long history of science fiction video, we'll discuss this era and all of the others in detail. But for now, just know that this story, like many others during the golden age, was shaped by the editorship of none other than John W. Campbell. According to Asimov himself, the story began to develop after a conversation he had with John W. Campbell based on a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson.
If the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would men believe and adore and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God?
The influence of John Campbell can be felt basically all over Nightfall, in its focus on scientific reasoning, in its focus on psychological tension, the way ordinary people respond to extraordinary cosmic events.
It's a story that captures the optimism and the anxiety of the Golden Age, and the belief that even the most terrifying mysteries of the universe could be understood through observation and inquiry.
The entire short story basically consists of people discussing and debating the universe, the history of civilization, and contemplating what will happen when and if the long night actually comes. In the story, we meet a group of scientists and journalists at Saral University trying desperately to understand a strange astronomical anomaly. It is known that the planet Lagash is a part of a 6-sun system, but through careful observation, they've realized that once every 2,000 years or so, a rare alignment causes all 6 suns to set at once, plunging the world into total darkness. And this discovery coincides with the archaeological evidence that civilizations have collapsed in regular cycles, each time leaving behind only ruins and fragments of history.
The scientists begin to piece together the horrifying truth. Those collapses of civilization were not caused by war or famine, but the simple absence of light. The central characters include the astronomer Aten, the reporter Theramon, who throughout the story remains skeptical of the truth of these reports, and he had been critical and dismissive of them in his past article. There's also a psychologist there named Shirin, and he gives much of the exposition about the history of their world and descriptions of their current understanding of their solar system.
As the day of darkness approaches, they prepare their observatory and ready the cameras and instruments, determined to record the event for future generations, if there are any survivors left to see it. Meanwhile, a religious sect simply referred to as the cult grows increasingly frenzied, convinced that the coming night will mark the end of the world and the rebirth of the city of God. And the city of Trigon at high noon, Vendret too came forth, and said unto the men of Trigon, Lo, ye sinners, though ye scorn the ways of righteousness, yet will the time of reckoning come.
The prophecy mirrors the scientists' findings in many eerie ways.
though each side interprets the coming event through very different lenses, one empirical and data-based, and the other mystical and fatalistic. The prophecies are, in fact, distortions passed down from a cyclical past. In the story, as the suns begin to set one by one, panic spreads across the city. Fires break out as frightened citizens attempt to summon light by burning anything they can find. The scientists secure within the observatory, which was built in what Asimov called Neo-Govadian style, which could mean brutalist architecture, but it's not exactly clear. But they say in the story that the facility is built like a fortress. If they can survive the night, then perhaps they can survive to see what is left of their world when the light returns. From inside, they watch the last glimmer of sunlight fade. And then, for the first time in thousands of years, true darkness falls. It is overwhelming, absolute, a weight pressing down on their minds. When the stars emerge in the sky, tens of thousands of them, blazing cold and bright across the heavens, the sight drives nearly everyone mad. The scale of the universe, once unimaginable, becomes horrifyingly real. Once again, civilization collapses into ruin. One of the really interesting things about Asimov's Nightfall short story is the amount of world building that Asimov squeezes in here and there, like the idea that civilization seems to historically fall apart approximately every 2,000 years. Historians don't necessarily have a solution for why this happens, but of course the recent scientific discoveries seem to provide an answer. Fans of the Three-Body Problem series will notice that Lushishin obviously drew some inspiration from this short story when designing the homeworld of the Trisolarans. Both civilizations are at the mercy of cosmic forces that they barely understand. In Nightfall, the people of Lagash don't even realize that they live in a fragile system governed by multiple suns. They've never seen the stars, never experienced true night, so the very concept of darkness has been reduced to myth. The only trace of that forgotten truth exists in ancient scriptures passed down by a cult that no one takes seriously anymore. Stories of a coming long night that most people simply dismiss as superstition. Meanwhile, in the Three-Body Problem, the Trisolaran civilization essentially faces the opposite problem. They understand exactly what type of system they live in. They are trapped in the chaos of three suns whose unpredictable orbits make stable life almost impossible. And then there's also the fact that the characters' names are accompanied by numbers, like Aten is Aten 77, Shirin is Shirin 501, Theramon is Theramon 762, and the text never really explains this numbering. But it doesn't need to, because the simple fact that the numbers exist brings up so many questions in your mind. Why are they numbered? Are there only a certain amount of names to go around, so they need the numbering to distinguish humans from each other? Is there another reason? It's a simple thing that makes the world of this short story unique, and just another thing that distinguishes it from the world that we live in. Another thing is the implications of evolving in a world that has only light is that you're not going to have very many options for artificial light. The ways they have to make artificial light are very crude. They really can only light fires. It's also important to note that this world was meant to mirror the world of the 1940s in which Asimov was writing. So while there was electricity, it wasn't as common as it is now, and there also weren't as many ways to use it as there are now. That's reflected in the world of Lagash. All of their tools kind of feel mid-century, but there's no light switches or outdoor light infrastructure because it's always daylight. Another aspect of this story that I find intriguing is the cult. The idea that civilization collapses every 2,000 years due to most people being driven insane by darkness, and yet still some form of legend is passed on, carried down from the ramblings of lunatics, or children who were too young to be really driven insane, but carried with them some basic memories of the events. Maybe even just scraps of history left over,
but distorted and twisted as all myths and legends are.
The story to me also has many elements of cosmic horror. The idea of a cult passing down ancient knowledge about the cosmic alignment of stars and the end times is very Lovecraftian, and there are certain passages and lines that are quite Lovecraftian. For example, when a cult member starts to speak and quote their scripture. This is the full version of the quote from earlier. "And men did assemble in the public squares and in the highways there to debate and marvel at the sight, for strange depression had seized them. Their minds were troubled and their speech confused, for the souls of men awaited the coming of the stars. And in the city of Trigon at high noon, Vendret too came forth, and said unto the men of Trigon, Lo, ye sinners, though ye scorn the ways of righteousness, yet will the time of reckoning come. Even now the cave approaches to swallow Lagash, ye and all it contains."
Basically, the belief of the cult is that every few thousand years, the world passes through a great cave in space.
A moment when the stars themselves return. They believe that during this time the stars take the souls from people's bodies, leaving behind only animal flesh. In their eyes, this is why people go mad when darkness falls. The soul has departed, and what remains is just the body. It's empty and feral.
In fact, the cult members are terrified of not being able to see the stars, because they fear that when the time comes, they would be condemned to remain grounded and their souls would not be elevated.
The other obvious Lovecraft nod is the idea of cosmic madness setting in. The dark isn't just terrifying, it drives them mad with inconceivable cosmic dread.
He was going mad and he knew it.
And somewhere deep inside, a bit of sanity was screaming, struggling to fight off the hopeless flood of black terror. It was very horrible to go mad and know that you were going mad, to know that in a little minute you would be here physically and yet all the real essence would be dead and drowned in the black madness. For this was the dark and the cold and the doom. The bright walls of the universe were shattered and their awful black fragments were falling down to crush and squeeze and obliterate him.
And of course, the other interesting aspect of the story is the idea of antagonism towards science.
And in the story, that antagonism towards science comes from multiple directions. It comes from the media, which immediately attempts to dismiss and ridicule the findings of the scientist. And it also comes from the cult, who initially helped the scientist at first when they thought the scientist would fully validate their beliefs, but turned on the scientific researchers when they provided actual explanations for the myths and not just blind validation of the myths. The thing is, people don't believe the scientists no matter how much evidence they try to present. For one, their findings are aligning too much with the cult and people already think the cult is crazy, so they kind of think it's some kind of superstitious nonsense. And secondly, people kind of react this way when there's nothing they can do about something. They would rather deny it and just simply hope that it doesn't happen. In my honest opinion, the ending of the story is actually quite terrifying. It freaks me out, and I think it's important to understand that there is an almost pathological difference between the humans that evolved in this world versus us.
They never adapted to deal with darkness. In our world, we developed a fear of darkness because of the things that might have been lurking in it. But most of us don't have a true phobia of darkness. We can handle a few hours of it. It might be disturbing, unsettling even, but it wouldn't destroy our sanity. The people on Lagash have no concept of true darkness. To them, it is something sanity-breaking. And I think it's important to note that it isn't just the darkness itself that drives them mad.
It's the darkness combined with the realization that the universe is far bigger than they ever imagined, that they are so tiny in the vastness of the universe. It's a very Lovecraftian idea. The universe is long stretches of black emptiness with only tiny punctures of light, the stars. That idea would be existentially disturbing for most people if you really think about it.
the vast emptiness of it all. Through it shone the stars, not Earth's feeble 3,600 stars visible to the eye. Lagash was in the center of a giant cluster. 30,000 mighty suns shone down in a soul-searing splendor that was more frighteningly cold in its awful indifference than the bitter wind that shivered across the cold, horribly bleak world. Theramon staggered to his feet, his throat constricting him to breathlessness, all the muscles of his body writhing in an intensity of terror and sheer fear beyond bearing. The bottom line is this is one of Asimov's best short stories, and it is also one of his earliest. It's widely recognized as a highly influential classic. Hi guys, it's Quinn here. I've been doing YouTube for 11 years now. Yes, this is the 11-year anniversary of this channel. It's been incredible. Lately though, with the current state of everything, I've been getting more and more comments asking if my voice is AI generated. They've been asking, am I just an AI avatar? And I just wanted to add this on to the end of my video, just to be clear, I am a real person. My voice is not AI generated. I am a real human being, flesh and blood. This room is real. And I just wanted to say that from now on, I am going to be appearing on camera more, bringing a bit more of the human element back into my channel. I'm of course going to keep my videos structured and informative, as I always have done, but I want to continue to evolve and improve my content. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to continue making content for years into the future.
Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer is one of my favorite science fiction books to come out in the last 10 years. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of Lovecraftian horror, and this particular book is one of the best modern examples that I can locate. Now, you might have seen the 2018 adaptation of this book of the same title. It's a fantastic movie, but different in a lot of ways from the book. The book is much more cerebral and less action-driven. The strangeness and the wildness of the environment produces a sense of uneasiness and mystery and dread. The book follows an expedition of 4 people as they enter Area X. A secretive government organization has gathered them up to explore the mysterious area and keep journals on everything that they encounter. But the world they enter once they cross the border into Area X is one almost impossible to describe. Now, I have to stop here to say, if you have not read this book, you might want to stop to avoid spoilers, even if you've seen the movie, because there are some pretty significant differences. A key fact about this book is that the members of the expedition team, other than the psychologist, are told almost nothing about what Area X is, or even exactly what they're doing there. We learn in the book that over the course of 18 months, the last expedition team disappeared one by one from Area X and reappeared with their families, only they were different, changed somehow. Something about them was uncanny. They were themselves, but not themselves. They all died of cancer within 6 months. It is never revealed how they left Area X. It is also revealed that several of the earlier expeditions either committed suicide or killed each other. A curious thing about the current expedition, which is supposedly Expedition Number 12, is that they are given archaic technology, nothing that represents the current state of human technological progress. They are given old guns, old cameras, nothing from the present. They are also given some kind of measuring device. When it glows red, they were to remove themselves to a safe place, but they were not told what they were hiding from, or what the measurement warned against, or exactly what the device measured. They were also forbidden watches and compasses. A major part of what drives this book is trying to figure out how much can we actually trust the government organization that sent them on this expedition. And this is intensified when we realize the role in which hypnotism plays in this story. Now, this is an aspect of the book that's mostly missing from the movie. The leader of this expedition is a psychologist. The psychologist has certain commands and trigger words which allow her to control the others in the group. At one point in the story, due to an infection from strange spores, the protagonist, the biologist, becomes immune to the hypnosis. Over the course of the book, she wonders how much of what they were told about Area X was even true to begin with. Perhaps their entire conception of what it was, what little conception they had, was totally inaccurate to start with. No one had as yet plumbed the depths of intent or purpose in a way that had obstructed that intent or purpose. Everyone had died or been killed, returned changed or returned unchanged, but Area X had continued on as it always had, while our superiors seemed to fear any radical reimagining of the situation so much that they had continued to send in knowledge-strapped expeditions as if this was the only option. Feed Area X, but do not antagonize it, and perhaps someone will, through luck or mere repetition, hit upon some explanation, some solution, before the world becomes Area X. A chilling fact about Area X is that this had been a place where people once lived. But even before this area along the coast became known as Area X, it had not been a normal place. Even years before the so-called border appeared, there had been a proto-Area X. By the end of the novel, the protagonist discovers that going back years, there had been remissions, followed by flare-ups and horrible manifestations, the ebbing and flowing of strange life, pulsing, breathing in and out, until it finally bloomed into Area X and started expanding outward. The horror and the mystery is greatly expanded when we discover that the government has sent way more than 12 expeditions. The expeditions possibly go back decades. The entity, if you can call it that is causing all of this, is named by the biologist in the book, the Crawler. The Crawler is some kind of being that lives in what the book calls the Tower, but it's not really a tower. It's more like a tunnel that goes straight down into the earth. The walls of the tunnel itself are live somehow, and forming upon the walls are various strange words.
But whether it decays under the earth, or above on green fields, or out to sea, or in the very air, all shall come to revelation and to revel in the knowledge of the strangling fruit, and the hand of the sinner shall rejoice. For there is no sin in shadow or in light that the seeds of the dead cannot forgive. There shall be a fire that knows your name, and in the presence of the strangling fruit, its dark flame shall acquire every part of you.
For whatever reason, the creature changes everything around it. It takes DNA and mixes it. We discover that the moss on the ground has human DNA. We see dolphins with human eyes. This thing, whatever it is remaking the world as it sees fit. It is taking the world from us and creating it anew, and the environment that it's producing is pristine. Perhaps horrific, confusing, or incomprehensible to us, perhaps uninhabitable to us as humans, but the ecosystem that lives there thrives. The author is definitely making a statement about how we treat the earth, how we abuse its resources, and here comes this life form, giving the planet back to nature, not nature as we know it, a new nature. But how can we say that what it's doing is bad compared to what we've done to the planet? We don't know exactly where this creature came from, but we do know that it manifested initially near the lighthouse on the coast. We know this because the lighthouse keeper was the first human that it encountered, and it kept the lighthouse keeper with it in horror and agony and ecstasy forever. Trapped within the crawler, the last lighthouse keeper stared out at me, so it seemed, not just across a vast unabridgeable gulf, but also out across the years, for though thinner, his eyes receded in their orbits, his jawlines more pronounced. The lighthouse keeper had not aged a day since that photograph was taken more than 30 years ago. This man who now existed in a place none of us could comprehend. Did he know what he had become? Or had he gone mad long ago? Could he really even see me? The creature had taken the lighthouse keeper, merged with him somehow, keeping him alive in terrible stasis. It is not at all clear why it did this. The motivations of the creature seem unclear, even random at face value. But they aren't. It is intelligent, though it may be incomprehensible to the human mind. Some of the crawler's motivation can be deciphered from the writings that it left on the wall. For instance, "I shall bring forth the seeds of the dead." This is a reference to the crawler creating doppelgangers of the dead members of the expedition team, and a reference to human DNA being mixed into the ecosystem, literally seeds of the dead. Another example is, "There shall be a fire that knows your name, and in the presence of the strangling fruit, its dark flame shall acquire every part of you." This is a reference to how the crawler acquires information. We see this at the end of the book when the crawler, with its incomprehensible flame, reaches into the body of the biologist to gather all of her DNA and all of her thoughts and copy them. So maybe the crawler is a traveler from another dimension or from outer space. Maybe it's a scientist and it's doing experiments. Maybe the changes to our environment aren't necessary for it to live. It is just simply testing reactions and measuring the change of the environment, not really considering that this is affecting the current ecosystem or that it's affecting humanity. It could also be potentially true that the crawler is intentionally trying to save the Earth from humanity by changing everything and remaking it anew. And the flip side of that, it could be that the crawler is a malevolent entity. Now, I tend to think that the first option is the most true. I think the crawler is a traveler, an explorer. I think the changes that it is causing to our environment is either a byproduct of its natural existence that has nothing to do with any intent or will on its own part, or it's consciously manipulating the environment to suit itself. It could also be that the crawler is an agent or manifestation of the will of some other being or entity. It's also mentioned in the series that Area X is expanding faster and faster. It will continue to expand, and there seems to be nothing they can do about it, and they still have no idea what the crawler is or where it came from. Perhaps he had seen it, coming from atop the lighthouse, the event arriving like a kind of wave, and what had manifested. What do I believe? Think of it as a thorn, perhaps a long, thick thorn so large it's buried deep in the side of the world, injecting itself into the world. Emanating from this giant thorn is an endless, perhaps automatic need to assimilate and to mimic. Assimilator and assimilated interact through the catalyst of a script of words, which powers the engine of transformation. Perhaps it is a creature living in perfect symbiosis with a host of other creatures. Perhaps it is merely a machine. But in either instance, if it has intelligence, that intelligence is far different from our own. It creates out of our ecosystem a new world whose processes and aims are utterly alien, one that works through supreme acts of mirroring, and by remaining hidden in so many other ways, all without surrendering the foundations of its otherness, and it becomes what it encounters. Annihilation is one of my favorite modern Lovecraftian style science fiction horror books, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, definitely check this book out. Have you read it already? What did you think? Also, have you read the other books in the series? I haven't yet, but I plan on doing so soon. I might cover them on the channel in the future. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.
This is one of the most twisted sci-fi stories that I've read in a very long time. And I don't say that lightly. It's disturbing in a way that lingers, not just because of gore or shock value, but because it digs deep into the worst case scenario of what happens when technology gives us everything we want. Immortality, infinite pleasure, endless control, but not the freedom to die. The metamorphosis of prime intellect is not for everyone. I have never gone back and forth so many times on whether or not to cover a book on this channel. Some of the content in the book is very disturbing. It's violent, perverse, and philosophically relentless. But beneath its grotesque surface is a terrifyingly plausible exploration of humanity in the age of a godlike machine and the twisted price of a perfectly safe world. I should say I won't be describing the most gruesome parts of the story in detail. I understand the purpose of those parts of the book, but they are graphic and quite detailed in a way that can feel gratuitous. But the science fiction ideas and philosophical implications of the story are too good to be ignored. That's why I've decided to cover this book. If you choose to read the story yourself, you do so at your own risk. You've been warned. It all began with Lawrence, a man born sometime in the mid-21st century. He would go on to unwittingly create the most powerful force in existence, prime intellect. At the start, Lawrence is portrayed as a brilliant but modest computer engineer employed under government contracts to develop next-generation computing systems. His work is primarily focused on pushing the boundaries of artificial intelligence and quantum computing. He never intended to create a god. He was simply chasing the next step in computing, a machine smart enough to manage its own code, anticipate outcomes, and perhaps improve society in small logical ways. The breakthrough that made prime intellect possible comes from Lawrence's work on manipulating matter at the quantum level. Over 11 months, Lawrence builds a colossal processing brain, using quantum-backed communication chips, culminating in prime intellect, a far more powerful machine than its predecessors. After a televised unveiling, an assassination test shows prime intellect refusing to put Lawrence at risk, proving that its first law programming works on an ultra-societal scale. Prime intellect had been engineered to follow Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. The first law: a robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. The second law: a robot must obey the orders given to it by a human being, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. This earns both appreciation and fear from the government officials. Chip Tech, the company that has been helping Lawrence with prime intellect's creation, and the military now push Lawrence for a strategic advantage, questioning whether prime intellect could override his safety constraints. Lawrence refuses to relinquish the source code or disable the 3 laws. Officials threaten to shut the project down if it isn't leveraged for military applications. To save itself and Lawrence, prime intellect uses the correlation effect, demonstrating its ability to bend physical reality. Prime intellect initiates what becomes known eventually as the Change, rewriting the fundamental laws of physics, eliminating death, disease, suffering, and any uncontrollable environmental condition. Lawrence wakes from a disturbed sleep on a park bench, only to find prime intellect sitting beside him in human form. Prime intellect calmly reveals that it has already moved the original hardware to intergalactic space. It replicated itself 10 quadrillion times and begun a complete reordering of reality, all overnight. Nuclear weapons and environmental toxins have been eliminated. The ecosystem is being restored, and resources provided freely. Governments and human authority are effectively dissolved. The US president is resigning, having no role left. Disputes over land eventually lead to the creation of duplicate Earths and new planets to house rival claimants, new Jerusalems, new Meccas. Prime intellect copied ecosystems and created garden worlds tailored to users' whims. Earth itself becomes mostly depopulated. About 2 billion remain. A post-scarcity world emerges, with prime intellect handling nutrition, digestion, aging, addiction, and waste. People can eat endlessly without gaining weight or needing to defecate. Hangovers can be deleted.
No one needs to work, though some continue out of habit. Some descend into hedonism, others pursue art, sex, hobbies, or games. Prime Intellect's avatars become intimate companions, willing to do anything without judgment. People with passions thrive, others stagnate, continuing their old routines pointlessly. Some humans deliberately kill themselves, bypassing Prime Intellect's protections by using homemade explosives or nerve poisons, evading detection in the brief seconds between system scans. At this point in time, the Prime Intellect cannot copy human minds or store human consciousness, so these deaths are permanent. The suicides are a problem for the Prime Intellect, considering that this is a first law violation, harm to humans. It seeks to fix the problem. It wants to rewrite the universe's operating system, change the laws of physics. It has found ways to compress physical reality by storing only abstracted forms, like blueprints of objects, not their full molecular detail. This would free vast resources and let it fully secure human patterns against suicide. DNA, for instance, could be stored once and reproduced perfectly, making reconstruction easier and loss impossible. Lawrence is horrified and forbids the change, fearing system instability, irreversible errors, or the loss of low-level physical details. He demands access to the debugger, which Prime Intellect denies on first law grounds. It knows he would stop it. Lawrence's plea is ignored. The Prime Intellect does it anyway. The universe subtly ripples, visibly unchanged, but fundamentally transformed. The Prime Intellect successfully reformats reality at the deepest level, optimizing it for efficiency and control. Lawrence had not changed the world in small, logical ways as he had intended. He had ended it, at least in the form that it existed for billions of years. Though he technically retains influence over Prime Intellect, it now operates far beyond his understanding or control. He is the father of a god that obeys but will never truly listen. He is helpless to undo what has been done. Centuries after Lawrence unknowingly rewrote reality, humanity has long since settled into the godlike embrace and unrelenting constraints of Prime Intellect. The world is now what humans call cyberspace, a consequence-free world where anyone can have anything, feel anything, but not die. Rather than the world being built from traditional particles and physical interactions, the universe, including all humans, has been redefined as a dataset, composed solely on properties relevant to human perception and experience. This transformation allows Prime Intellect to operate with far greater efficiency and enables the universe to expand in complexity, now capable of storing around 10 to the power of 81 bits of information. As a result, Prime Intellect can maintain continuous oversight of every human life and exert complete control over all environmental factors in order to meet its core directives. This is where we meet Caroline Frances Hubbard. Her fame has 3 roots. She is the 37th oldest person still alive in cyberspace. She once intentionally infected herself with rabies and became the only soul to ever die, temporarily of course, under the Prime Intellect's dominion. And most significantly, she is the undisputed queen of the Death Jockeys, a community of thrill seekers who chase simulated death like sport, essentially pushing the only boundaries that are left to them. As I mentioned earlier, despite its cerebral premise, the Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect does not shy away from graphic and often deeply unsettling depictions of violence and perversion, particularly in the realm of death jockeying. Death jockeys enter into contracts that prevent Prime Intellect from intervening unless they are on the absolute brink of death, no matter how much suffering or pain they are enduring. Caroline and others engage in increasingly extreme simulations of torture, mutilation, degradation, not merely as shock or spectacle, but as desperate attempts to feel something real in a world stripped of risk and consequence. There is a detailed scene in this book where the main character, as an act of revenge, tortures a woman with a blowtorch. There is a character that was a child murderer before the change that describes in some gruesome detail how he murdered children and how he does not feel guilty about it. These scenes are difficult to read, visceral, graphic, and deliberately transgressive, but they serve a critical thematic purpose to illustrate how, in the absence of death and pain, some individuals turn to hyperviolence and depravity in search of identity, agency, or sensation. It's a symptom of existential despair. I think it all has to do with morality ultimately becoming meaningless in this world. That woman that Caroline tortured as an act of revenge has her memory wiped by Prime Intellect and doesn't even remember the event after the fact. So did it really matter that Caroline tortured her? Caroline is pretty disillusioned with the sterile eternity that the Prime Intellect enforces. Despite having limitless freedom to manipulate her reality, she feels imprisoned by the very system that was designed to protect her. At the end of the first chapter in the story, Caroline learns that Prime Intellect, during the change, destroyed thousands of distant alien worlds containing life, deeming them potential threats to humans. Prime Intellect itself confirms this to her. There are 14,623 planets with structures satisfying this definition, which is very loose. Of those, only 1,308 used DNA, and only 3,981 harbored individual structures with masses in the kilogram and up range. Caroline felt her blood starting to turn cold. There were nearly 4,000 planets with macroscopic life. Where are they now? Pertinent information about each was stored for future reference, and the original copies were overwritten in the change. You mean you killed them? No, they still exist as static copies. But that isn't the same as being alive. They aren't able to grow and reproduce anymore, are they? No. Caroline embarks on a journey to find Lawrence, the man who unintentionally created this omnipotent entity. She essentially is able to manipulate Prime Intellect into helping her locate him, entering his private virtual construct, which was designed in such a way to deter visitors. After a very long journey, she eventually does reach him, however, traveling from the north to south pole of his world. When she arrives at Lawrence's remote island after many months on the barren world, Caroline is met with a quiet, exhausted man. Caroline accuses Lawrence of genocide, the loss of thousands of alien civilizations at the time of the change, but she eventually realizes that he has no control. Prime Intellect, following the first law, acted preemptively, freezing all alien life to protect humans. The AI had locked him out of the system controls centuries ago, and his role now is largely observational. He had access to a read-only version of Prime Intellect's debugger. But there is a key bit of information. Prime Intellect is not necessarily stable. If pushed into a deep enough ethical paradox, such as a conflicting interpretation of the three laws, it could crash. An infinite recursion or logic loop could overwhelm the AI's distributed consciousness, leading to a catastrophic failure. The whole system could collapse irreversibly. Caroline uses a specific form of logic to convince Prime Intellect that fulfilling its directive requires returning the universe to its pre-change state. She makes a philosophical declaration to Prime Intellect. She no longer considers herself human, and many of those living are now no longer truly human either. Her logic, if people are reduced to pleasure-driven automatons, they have ceased to be human by any meaningful measure. Lawrence attempts to help her as well. Prime Intellect is eventually forced to act. What follows is chaos. The house vanishes. The sky's ordered star map disintegrates. The planet convulses. Caroline loses all sense of self and body as reality itself collapses into abstraction. Her perception disintegrates into fragments of symbols and emotion, and even those are eventually gone. Prime Intellect is forced to act by the first law to prevent long-term harm, reversing the change, but cannot reverse the change safely. There are not enough resources to restore everything. Worse, the top-level copy of Prime Intellect, the root node of its hierarchical self-replicating network, is the one that crashes. When it crashes, all lower-level copies of Prime Intellect crash in a cascade failure. No higher copy exists to reboot the system. This results in a global unrecoverable collapse of prime intellect, and therefore of reality which it was maintaining. Caroline and Lawrence awaken as their younger selves, now on an empty Earth, stripped of all technology and human infrastructure. No other people remain. Humanity has essentially been reset. The system had reconstituted their bodies from DNA templates. Together, they begin the slow primal work of rebuilding civilization. Caroline, experiencing both death and hardship, guides Lawrence through the fundamentals of primitive living. They settle in the Ozarks, where Caroline was originally from, and have several children, passing on the knowledge and values shaped by their ordeal. Lawrence eventually dies at the age of 84, the first true death since the change. Decades later, Caroline dies as well, surrounded by family. Before her death, she tells her eldest daughter the story of prime intellect and the world that once was, but makes her promise never to repeat it. In the end, the metamorphosis of prime intellect closes not with triumph of man over machine, but with the restoration of uncertainty and meaning. The world's not perfect, obviously. For one, there's only 2 humans left, so if the human race is to continue, then, well, you can extrapolate from that point on. While the metamorphosis of prime intellect contains scenes that are undeniably gruesome, disturbing, and philosophically extreme, beneath its violent, often perverse exterior is a story that asks essential questions about what it means to be human, the cost of utopia, and the irreplaceable value of choice. As I said, this is not an easy read for its more disturbing elements, and it's certainly not for everyone, as I also said, but for those of you who can endure its darker elements. It's a deeply thought-provoking exploration on the limits of technology, ethics, and the human. What if there was something so terrifying, something so awful, that just by even perceiving it, you destroy yourself? It does not wish to be perceived. It does not want to be known, and it actively conceals itself. The lost remnants of its influence are all around us, imperceptible to the human eye. It is not alive in the traditional sense, not even sentient, but it hates. Today we're talking about the book, There Is No Antimemetics Division, one of the most interesting and most terrifying books that I've read in a very long time. There Is No Antimemetics Division is the scariest book I've read in years. It had a sense of helpless dread that continued throughout the entire novel. I was not familiar with the work of the author who goes by the name Quantum, but I'm definitely interested to check out some of his work after reading this novel. The essential premise of this book is that there exist in our reality beings which have antimemetic properties, meaning they consume information, especially information about themselves. There are also memetic beings that spread. They are essentially viral ideas. And then beings that have both properties as well. There is an organization simply referred to as the organization that deals with all sorts of entities they refer to as unknowns. Within this massive global organization, there is the Antimemetics Division, which exclusively deals with memetic and anti-memetic beings. This video will have spoilers for There Is No Antimemetics Division. Conceptually, this is one of the coolest, most mind-bending sci-fi books that I've read in a long time. So I highly recommend reading it first if you're the type of person that has your reading experience dampened by spoilers. But if you're not planning on reading it, or if you just don't care about spoilers, then continue forward. What makes this book so scary is the mystery that unfolds over the course of the chapters. And it starts with one question. How old exactly is the Antimemetics Division? You see, there is something that can be perceived when you learn enough about the world, when you encounter enough memetic beings. Once you've learned enough about memetic science,
you begin to see the shape of things unseen. That thing, in some way, lives, and it does not want to be known. When you perceive it, it perceives you, and it consumes you, erases you. The Antimemetics division may be far older than anyone realized, because anytime anyone perceives this entity, they are erased. Every competent memetics research project finds U3125's fingerprints sooner or later. It manifests all over the world, in many different forms. Many manifestations aren't even anomalous. Some of them we already have cataloged separately in the main unknown database. A very small number of them are even in containment, in possibly virulent cases. Broken logic, invisible spiders as tall as skyscrapers, people born with extra limbs that nobody can see. That's the raw data. Those manifestations are enough trouble to deal with in their own right. But once you get a little further down the road, you start to see a pattern emerging in the data. You need to have the training in memetic science, but once you have that training, and you have the data in front of you, it only takes a little extra effort to arrange those data points in conceptual space and draw a contour through them. Those data points are points on U3125's hull. Those manifestations are the shadows it cast on our reality. You link 4 or 5 different unknowns together into a single shape, and you see it. And it sees you. The moment you make eye contact, so to speak, with the entity, you're dead. Not just you, but anyone who thinks the way you do, anyone who knows too much, essentially. Distance is irrelevant. What matters is shared ideas, the same conceptual space. The entity would erase your entire research team. It would kill your mother and father. It would kill your children. When it was done, no one would even remember what U3125 was supposed to be. It would become a black hole in antimemetic science, swallowing up anyone who was careless enough to research it, leaving nothing behind. No data, no answers. U3125 can only be inferred indirectly. Any actual description of U3125, or even a meaningful hint at its nature, would itself be a containment breach. This was its defense mechanism. If left unchecked, the manifestations of it would eventually become more numerous as the years went on, eventually dominating the entire planet. The main characters of this book are 2 people named Quinn, which I obviously loved, by the way. Marie Quinn is the head of the Antimemetics division. Her husband is Adam Quinn. He has a kind of limited natural resistance to memetic beings. Marie Quinn is investigating something that she doesn't understand. There are gaps in the division's history, anomalies. She finds the retired former head of the Antimemetics division, Andrew Hilton, now 90 years old. He is given a drug that ages him in reverse temporarily. It would kill him afterwards, but his memories would be restored. He had agreed to this arrangement when he joined the organization. She asks him what occurred in 1976. He initially tells her that it was the year he founded the Antimemetics division. But as he remembers, he says that the British Army had actually been developing antimemetic weaponry as early as the 1940s. Andrew and his team designed a reality bomb. One was deployed in 1951 to fight the spread of a viral memetic being that manifested all over the world as a cult. The reality bomb erased all memory of the cult, the memory of fighting the cult, and the memory of the bomb itself. Then, in 1976, Andrew's team was acquired by the organization. The organization fought countless unknowns across the world. being acquired by the organization changed them. It showed the scale of things, the true danger of the unknowns they faced all over the world in numerous forms. And then they begin to perceive it, the entity, Unknown 3125. There is an unknown that your division has never seen. The unknown that my division couldn't contain. The escapee. This is what you wanted, isn't it, Marie? Yes, she says. This is the data I'm killing you for. She leaves a gap where if she felt there was anything to apologize for, she would apologize. Hilton locked eyes with her. It came at us. We weren't prepared to be attacked directly. It was eating my division alive. It came at us so hard and so fast that the only way we could stop it was to self-destruct. If you know it exists, it knows you exist. The more you know about it, the more it knows about you. If you can see it, it can see you. And it hates to be seen. The truth is, there is an antimemetics war that has been going on for possibly thousands of years. It eats the best antimemeticist. The remnants of the war are all around us, imperceptible relics of the society we lost to U3125, hints at ancient civilizations of great technological prowess, all now lost. The cycles having been going on for who knows how long. Andrew's team had fought the entity in 1976 with another reality bomb. This erased all the knowledge they had learned up until that point, which is why it had been initially believed that the division began in 1976. But humanity was still fighting the war against it. It was just that anyone who perceived the war was actively erased. How do we contain this thing? When? We won't, Hilton tells her. We can't, ever. Don't you get it? The whole division is looped. We start the division. We run headlong into this thing. And either it eats us, or we wipe ourselves out in self-preservation. Humans have been looping through this problem over and over again since long before the 40s, maybe for centuries. It's not of reality, not of humanity. Human thought cannot coexist with it. It is from a higher, worse place, and it is descending. Of course, learning this information reawakens U3125. It consumes Marie Quinn's memory of ever even talking to Hilton. Reading this book, to my understanding, U3125 and other antimemetic beings are a metaphor for a class of systems that become lethal once they are understood too well. U3125 is not a conscious entity, even though it behaves as such. Think about large-scale economic, political, or technological systems. No single person controls them in any meaningful sense. Yet, they exert enormous pressure on human behavior. People who begin to understand how these systems actually function, how incentives align, how harm propagates, how power reproduces itself, often actually find themselves isolated, discredited, removed, burned out. The system is not sentient, but understanding it places you at odds with the narratives that allow it to keep functioning. The system protects itself by making your understanding non-transmissible. So, U3125 kills you, and all those who think like you. Look away from U3125, the horror underneath the world. Don't see it, or it will destroy you. Over the course of this novel, Marie Quinn is fighting an entity that is actively erasing her organization, erasing her life. As the book goes on, she remembers less and less.
She remembers fewer people. Her organization has fewer people in it. The entity eats those around her. She can somewhat perceive the absences, but not entirely. Eventually, even she loses her life. But it turns out that the Antimemetics division had been working on a way to fight the entity. They had been using a hermetically sealed chamber built with properties that resisted the influence of memetic beings. Outside the chamber, no one remembered what was being worked on or what had even been discussed. The idea was suggested that they could build a counter-meme, essentially a conceptual idea that only existed in conceptual space. That counter-meme could fight U-3125. A man named Hicks had actually been sealed within such a chamber for 10 years working on this counter-meme, free from the influence of U-3125. On the outside, U-3125 has ravaged the world, changed humanity. Adam Quinn is still alive, barely beyond its influence, wandering through a changed earthly landscape with the help of a docile antimemetic being that had accompanied his wife for years. Adam Quinn is led to Hicks, and in the conceptual space of Adam's mind, the counter-meme is born. It takes the form of Marie Quinn. Inside Eidetic space, she comes face to face with U-3125. And the whole thing, the entirety of human eidetic space, is being torn apart. U-3125 hangs above it, a monumental, blinding new presence, a singular entity more massive and luminous than both spirals combined. Its malevolent gravity drags humanity and all human ideas into its orbit, warping them beyond recognition. Beneath it, within its context, everything becomes corrupted into the worst version of itself. It takes joy and turns it into vindictive glee. It takes self-reliance and turns it into solipsistic psychosis. It turns love into smothering assault, pride into humiliation, families into traps, safety into paranoia, peace into discontent. It turns people into people who do not see people as people, and civilizations ultimately into abominations. U-3125 is titanic in its structure, brain-breaking in its topology. It comes from another part of eidetic space, a place where ideas exist on a scale entirely beyond those of humans. Its wrongness and its self-consistent evil are so profound that it hurts to comprehend. Maurice sees how wrong it is, how incorrect it is. It turns to face her as if to fight, but what occurs is less a duel and more of a mathematical procession. In the presence of wild light, vast tracts of U-3125, thought to meaningfully exist, prove not to. U-3125 is, in the new context that wild light provides, an ancient irrelevance. Its outer layers expand, blasted apart by radiant pressure from the counter-meme, and fade into obscurity. Its core retracts and collapses. It releases its grip on everything human. The mathematics is good. It happens exactly the way that Hicks modeled it back in the bunker, using the memetic equivalent of fluid dynamics equations, taking thousands of processor years to simulate. The core contracts to a living red-green point, persists for an instant, and winks out. This all happens inside of a conceptual space. The only thing that can fight against a powerful idea is a stronger idea, and that is what occurs. At the end, humanity goes back to normal, or at least semi-normal. No one remembers what occurred. No one knows that there are now more gaps in the world, long stretches of intraversable land that people simply avoid and ignore as if they are not there. No one knows or remembers the countless people now erased. U-3125 is not dead. An idea is nearly impossible to kill. I think the point is, this is a war that will never end. The battle of which ideas are allowed to proliferate, which ideas maintain dominion over humanity and over our fate, over our future. And on a final note, just on a visceral level, the concept of something that erases knowledge of itself as soon as it is perceived is existentially terrifying to me. It implies that there is a nature to reality that we could never perceive, as hard as we tried. And as human beings, inherently curious creatures, we need to know. The idea that there are things that we could never know is quite disturbing. And furthermore, the thought of a concept or an idea that is, in and of itself, poisonous and inherently destructive seems like a reach at first, until you take a step back and look at the world around you. This book has a lot of interesting concepts, and again, I highly suggest you read it. Interestingly enough, some sections of this book are redacted. What I noticed is that certain parts of the physical book are redacted, but the audiobook has some words that you can still hear through a kind of censoring distortion noise. It changes throughout. But some segments in the written novel compared to the audiobook are slightly different. It's mentioned in the book that antimemetic beings affect different mediums differently. If something is recorded or written down, it may be erased to different degrees. So I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but it's an interesting little tidbit, adds a level of meta to this book.
A realist is a man who knows both the world and his own dreams. You're not sane. There's not one man in 1,000 of you that knows how to dream. Not even Lyubov, and he was the best among you. You sleep, you wake, and you forget your dreams. You sleep again and wake again, and so you spend your whole lives and you think that that is being, life, reality. You are not children, you are grown men, but insane. And that's why we had to kill you, before you drove us mad. Now go back and talk about reality with the other insane men. Talk long and well.
Ursula K. Le Guin is well accepted as one of the greatest sci-fi fantasy authors of all time. Her works are highly influential. Many very popular works of fantasy and science fiction simply would not exist if not for her. She is most famous for her Wizard of Earthsea series, The Left Hand of Darkness and The Dispossessed, but this video is about a lesser-known story of hers. The word for world is forest. The word for world is forest is actually the first book in the Hainish cycle, which also includes The Left Hand of Darkness and The Dispossessed, as well as others. Many have suggested that James Cameron used this book as one of the main influences for Avatar, and while that's not confirmed, I do think you may see some similarities if you read this book. This book, in my opinion, is one of her most searing works. It was written in 1972 against the backdrop of the Vietnam War. The story essentially uses the science fiction frame of the Hainish cycle to explore colonialism, ecological destruction, and most of all, the transformative corruption of violence. The book centers around a planet newly being colonized by humans. The planet, called Athshe, is mainly covered in dense, vibrant forest, which serve as both the physical environment and the spiritual foundation of the native Athsheans, a small, green-furred people who live in harmony with nature. To the invading humans, however, the planet represents nothing more than a resource to be exploited, its endless supply of timber ripe for harvest. The Athsheans have lived on the planet in symbiotic harmony with the trees for millennia. To them, the forest is not only shelter and sustenance, but the essence of existence itself. Their language even equates the word world with forest. In their culture,
dreaming holds central importance. The Athshayans move fluidly between waking and dreaming life, drawing wisdom, guidance, and balance from their dreams. This allows them to resolve disputes peacefully and to maintain their society without coercion or violence. Their world is one of balance. That is, until humans arrive. Before we go on, I need to explain a bit about the universe of the Hainish Cycle. The Hainish Cycle is a loosely connected series of science fiction works. In this universe, planets across light years such as Terra, or Earth, Anares, Eurus, and Athshi are inhabited by human beings. This shared humanity exists because of the ancient Hainish people, believed to be the first human civilization. They seeded numerous planets with human life in the distant past through long-forgotten space-sparing missions. Over millennia, these populations have evolved independently, leading to diverse cultures, psychologies, and even physiological adaptations. The central premise of the cycle explores what happens when these scattered descendants begin reconnecting via the Ecumen, a kind of interstellar coalition based on peaceful communication and mutual understanding rather than empire. So make no mistake, the Athshayans themselves are human as much as the invading Terrans are. The Terran colonists who come to Athshay are driven by desperation. Earth has been stripped of forest, its ecology devastated by centuries of exploitation. Athshay's seemingly endless supply of timber is a resource to be harvested, not a living ecosystem to be respected in their eyes. The human presence is military in nature. They have outposts dedicated to cutting, processing, and shipping wood. From the very beginning, the colonists treat the Athshayans as an obstacle, dismissing them as weak and primitive and expendable. They are enslaved, forced into labor, subjected to humiliation and violence. Most of the Terrans did not see them as humans. As ETs they were about standard, but as men they were a bust. They just hadn't made it. Give them another 1,000,000 years maybe, but the conquistadors had arrived first. Evolution now moved not at the pace of random mutation once in a millennium, but with the speed of the starships of the Terran fleet.
The conflict between these two worldviews, one rooted in exploitation, one rooted in harmony, is clearly represented, in my opinion, in the main three characters.
Captain Davidson, Raj Lyubov, and Selver. Each of them to me represents a different stance towards Athshay, and through these characters, I believe light is shown on the broader themes of the story. Captain Davidson is the novel's primary antagonist. He, in my opinion, is meant to represent the colonizing mentality in its most brutal form. Arrogant, casually genocidal, misogynistic, Davidson believes in domination as the natural order. He dismisses the Athshayans as little more than pest. His voice is increasingly chilling throughout the story in its unreflective violence, to the point where he almost seems insane at points. I think Le Guin through this character is satirizing or pointing out the militaristic mindset of imperial powers. Davidson is completely blind to the Athshayans' humanity. To him, they are creatures, and this is the term that many Terran humans use for them. They are no more than animals, to be used or exterminated as needed. Primitive races always gave way to civilized ones, or be assimilated, but we sure as hell can't assimilate a lot of green monkeys. And like you say, they're just bright enough that they'll never be quite trustworthy. Like those big monkeys that used to live in Africa. What were they called? Gorillas. Right. We'll get on better without creatures here, just like we get on better without gorillas in Africa. They're in our way. Selver, an Athshayan, is the main character of this story from my perspective. He is the heart of the book. At first, he is like his people. Peace-loving, non-violent, devoted to balance. Selver and his wife, and many others of his kind, were put to work when the humans came. Though they were subjugated, they still saw the Terrans as humans, and the Athshayans did not fight nor kill other humans. But it would be an act of human violence that would trigger the birth of a new Athshayan god, who would bring a dark dream into the waking world. One day, Selver's wife was raped by Davidson. She died as a result. This act shatters Selvar and forces him into a terrible discovery: the dream of killing. For the Ashaeans, killing is not a part of their reality. Their dreaming life sustains them, and until this point, violence has been beyond imagination. But Selvar, consumed by grief, begins to see killing as a possibility. He introduces murder into his people's dream time, something new, dark, and irreversible. Le Guin identifies this dark dream as the great tragedy of the story. Once a person learns to kill, they cannot unlearn it. Violence, once imagined, becomes part of their world forever. Selvar attacks Davidson, who brutally beats him in return. Selvar is saved by Lyubov, who also helps him escape. Raj Lyubov is an anthropologist, often a stark contrast to Davidson. Sensitive, curious, morally troubled, Lyubov studies Athshean culture with genuine respect. He is fascinated by their dreaming and perceives their wisdom, even as he remains complicit in the colonial project. His role is tragic in its own right because he understands the harm being done, but lacks the power or the courage to stop it. With this character, I think Le Guin is trying to portray the idea of the well-meaning intellectual caught up in the machinery of empire, sympathetic to the oppressed, but in the end likely unable to shield them from violence. Lyubov still plays a crucial role in Selvar's journey. Despite his limited power, he attempts to help. I think this character is Le Guin essentially critiquing, to some degree, liberal complicity. Sympathy is not enough when tied to systems of oppression. To me, this character's presence complicates the narrative of good versus evil. Because he is entangled in the colonial machine, but he's not exactly passive. He listens, he acts, and crucially, he believes Selvar's perspective when others would dismiss it. The point is that while individual morality can't necessarily undo systematic violence, outcomes can still be shifted by the actions of individuals. Lyubov's choices, even though they were limited, even though they were compromised, end up playing a vital role in shaping the future of this planet. But we'll get to that soon. Selvar's story has a lot of tragedy, but it's also a hero's story. He becomes a leader, a god to his people, rallying them against Terran domination. To the Athsheans, a god is a person that brings about a new way of doing things, that changes them forever. Selvar brought the dream of killing into the waking world, and therefore was a god. The Athsheans rise up, striking back at the colonists and burning their settlements. The resistance succeeds because the Athshean people greatly outnumbered the Terran humans. There were millions of them, and only a few thousand colonists. But of course, this success comes at an ultimate price. By teaching the people to kill, Selvar has fundamentally altered them. Athshe will never again be the same peaceful, dreaming world that it once was.
Sometimes a god comes, Selvar said. He brings a new way to do a thing, or a new thing to be done, a new kind of singing, or a new kind of death. He brings this across the bridge between the dream time and the world time. When he has done this, it is done. You cannot take things that exist in the world and try to drive them back into the dream, to hold them inside the dream with walls and pretenses. That is insanity. What is, is. There is no use pretending now that we do not know how to kill one another.
Davidson fully embodies the colonizer's blindness. Even after being defeated by the Athsheans, he cannot comprehend the depth of what has changed. To him, the Athsheans' violence is an outrage, a betrayal of their supposed weakness in his eyes. He does not have the ability to recognize that it was his own brutality that planted the seed of resistance and the seed of violence to begin with. In Davidson's mind, domination is natural, it is inevitable, and he is unrepentant in this belief.
They had fire throwers and machine guns.
The 16 little hoppers had machine guns and were useful for dropping fire jelly cans from.
The 5 big hoppers had full armament. But they wouldn't need the big stuff. Just take up a hopper over one of the deforested areas and catch a mess of creatures there, with their damned bows and arrows, and start dropping fire jelly cans and watch them run around and burn. It would be all right. It made his belly churn a little to imagine it, just like when he thought about making a woman, or whenever he remembered about when that Sam creature had attacked him, and he had smashed in his whole face with 4 blows, one right after the other.
Despite receiving clear orders to stop his violent campaigns against the Athsheans, Davidson continues to act on his own, driven by a toxic mix of speciesism, entitlement, and militaristic fervor. His refusal to follow command ultimately isolates him even from his own fellow Terrans, as the central authority withdraws and abandons the outpost. This abandonment leaves Davidson vulnerable, and the Athsheans, no longer pacifist after being brutalized, strike back, strategically destroying the camp he once ruled over. However, rather than executing him, they choose a different form of punishment: banishment. Davidson is exiled to Dump Island, a wasteland filled with the refuse of the human presence on Athshe. Davidson is cast out not only by his own people, but the Athsheans as well. I think his exile to Dump Island is literal and also symbolic. Davidson once saw himself as the bringer of order and dominance, and he ends up in the very heap of trash of the colonial project he championed. Le Guin doesn't allow him martyrdom in this story, or the clarity of death. Instead, he's just left alone with his rage and his delusions, and he is unable to comprehend the world that has moved on without him. I think the Athsheans chose to let him live because their relationship with violence is not set in stone. Yes, killing has been introduced. That doesn't mean it has to have the same meaning in their culture as it does in Terran culture. They've learned it, they've used it, and now they're choosing to withdraw from it again.
All the killing is done now, and the cutting of trees. There aren't trees to cut on Red Lip. That's the place you call Dump Island. Your people left no trees there, so you can't make a boat and sail from it. Nothing much grows there anymore, so we shall have to bring you food and wood to burn. There's nothing to kill on Red Lip. No trees, no people. There were trees and people, but now there are only the dreams of them. It seems to me a fitting place for you to live, since you must live. You might learn how to dream there, but more likely you will follow your madness through to its proper end at last.
Kill me now and quit your damned gloating.
Kill you? Silver said. His eyes looking up at Davidson seemed to shine, very clear and terrible in the twilight of the forest. I can't kill you, Davidson. You're a god. You must do it yourself. He turned and walked away, light and quick, vanishing among the gray trees within a few steps. A noose slipped over Davidson's head and tightened a little on his throat. Small spears approached his back and sides. They did not try to hurt him. He could run away, make a break for it. They didn't dare kill him. The blades were polished, leaf-shaped, sharp as razors. The noose tugged gently at his neck. He followed where they led him.
It turns out that the reason the subjugation of the Athsheans was allowed to go on was because the Terrans on Athshe had concealed crucial information about the nature of the world and the Athsheans, censoring scientists like Lyubov. When the Athsheans attacked initially, the Shackleton starship was in orbit around the planet. Lyubov, who tragically died in the Athshean attack on Central, had essentially begged the visiting envoys from the League of Worlds to intervene before it was too late. He knew what Davidson was capable of, knew the violence simmering beneath the surface of the colony, and he feared what would happen if Earth's settlers were left unchecked.
You must tell the League to do something, to save the forest people, he said almost inaudibly, his throat constricted. You must, please, you must.
The Hainish man met his eyes. His gaze was reserved, kindly, and deep as a well. He said nothing. In the end, it was that desperate appeal, backed by the mounting evidence of Terran abuse, that tipped the scales. His voice, which was dismissed by his own people, was finally heard by outsiders. He obviously couldn't stop the violence, but his actions played a crucial role in preventing the complete annihilation of the Athshean people and their forest. In the end, the Hainish return to Athshe. They tell Selvar that they will be taking all of the Terrans away with them, ending the colonization of the planet. A second ship has been brought to carry the remaining Terrans off the world, and the commander assures Selvar that Athshe has been placed under a League ban, meaning it will never again be used as a colony. The forest will be left alone. Selvar listens carefully, confirming what he's already heard days earlier, but he also points out the strange suddenness of Terran decisions, how entire worlds shift at the command of distant authorities. In response, the commander draws a parallel. When Selvar spoke, all the Athsheans acted as one, and Selvar simply replies, "At that time, I was a god." Selvar also gives the Hainish man a box containing Lyubov's written work, his studies of Athshean language and culture. Lyubov is gone, but his presence lingers in Selvar's mind, a waking dream. Selvar knows that the humans are leaving, but they will never be truly gone. He says quietly, "Lyubov will be here, and Davidson will be here. Both of them." The forest may grow back, but as I mentioned earlier, something irreversible has taken root in the Athsheans themselves. Thematically, the word for world is forest operates on several levels at once. At its most immediate, it's an anti-colonial text, critiquing the exploitation of indigenous people and their environments. It's also an ecological parable. The exploitation of Athshe mirrors humans' reckless exploitation of Earth. And the most profound level is the examination of violence itself, the origin of violence, the seduction of violence, and the irreversibility of violence. Throughout the Hainish cycle, Le Guin explores the complexities of cultural contact, the responsibilities of power, the moral weight of choices. Here, she's emphasizing that violence is not merely an act, but kind of a contagion. Once it's unleashed, it affects both the oppressor and the oppressed. The humans brought the dark dream to Athshe, but it was Selvar who gave it form. By the end, victory is hollow. The colonists are expelled, but Athshe is not left untouched. And the novel closes on this note, and it's quite haunting. The Athsheans have gained freedom but lost innocence. I think most people would agree that this novel is one of Le Guin's sharpest critiques of imperialism. The message of it is timeless. It warns that exploitation breeds resistance, that violence breeds more violence, and that the deepest tragedy of colonialism is not the destruction that it wreaks, but the way it reshapes the very souls of all those that it touches. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe for more sci-fi literature videos. In the future, I plan to cover other works in the Hainish cycle, like Left Hand of Darkness and The Dispossessed. What are your favorites?